Nosferatu has just been released in cinemas, and not only does this mark New Year's Day and the first movie of 2025, but it marks Robert Eggers' fourth feature film as director. Based on the 1922 movie that was released in Germany that was an unofficial knockoff of the 1897 novel Dracula, Eggers has put his spin on the movie and provided us with the story of the undead vampire-like demon that set a plague upon the town of Visborg so that he could be united with a bride that awoke him from what was an eternal slumber several years ago. So with that, let's dive into the movie, break down the ending, and explain exactly what unfolded. So let's get into it. Here is a review of Nosferatu and the ending explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The ending explained. With regards to the ending of this movie, we saw that Count Orlok arrived in Visborg to his property Schloss Grunwald with the intention of taking Ellen as a bride. Along with his arrival, he brought a deadly plague with him after killing all of the crew on the ship that he was on to show her that if she didn't agree to be his bride, following him tricking her husband Thomas into signing papers relinquishing their marriage and signing her over to him, then he'd continue to kill all of the people in Visborg and the people that she cared about most, especially her husband Thomas. Count Orlok was essentially a vampire and was the Nosferatu, sleeping in a coffin and casting his deadly shadow over all of the residents in Visborg. He was a demon that feasted on the blood of individuals in order to survive, and he slept during the day and awoke during the night, something that was key to the ending of the movie. During the beginning, Ellen essentially awoke Count Orlok and participated in a deal with him where she said to him that she'd be his after he asked her, hence why he wanted to be with her following her marriage. Orlok gave Ellen 3 nights to give herself over, and over the course of those nights, Orlok killed the people that she cared about most when she didn't agree to be with him. For example, Anna was feasted on by rats as a warning after the first night. The second night, Orlok killed Anna and Friedrich's daughters in the most brutal of fashions, discarding them as if they were nothing, and then he killed Anna and her unborn baby, which then meant that Friedrich was a lost man with his whole life being taken away from him, something which ultimately caused him to get the plague and end up dying in his wife's arms. With Ellen feeling the burden of the deaths of the people that she cared about most, and the people of Visborg being killed because of her deal that she made with the Nosferatu, behind her husband's back she realized that she was the only person that would be able to stop the Nosferatu. In the old text that the Professor von Franz found, he saw that the only way that the Nosferatu could be stopped would be if the lady gave herself over, because then that way the plague would be taken away as he would have gotten what he wanted. However, we saw Ellen take it a step further than that. The Nosferatu could only take the lady if she willingly handed herself over to him. He couldn't simply take her if she didn't want to go, hence why he gave her 3 nights in order to make her decision. With her giving herself over to him, opening the curtains and wearing a wedding dress, she allowed him to get on top of her and feast upon her. The very thing that he wanted to do most. However, what she did to ensure that he was destroyed was she kept him there feasting upon her until the first moment of daylight broke through the window, something which was dangerous for him. As we heard earlier on in the movie, he usually slept in his coffin during the day because the sunlight burned him. And this is exactly why we saw him ultimately being burned alive by the daylight that was breaking through. He died on top of her and was rendered to the state of a corpse. Ellen managed to stay alive right up until Thomas made it back to the house, but she literally drew her last breath as he grabbed a hold of her hand. She sacrificed herself because she loved him dearly, and she couldn't stand the idea of the person that she loved most in the world being killed because she wouldn't hand herself over. With the Nosferatu being killed, Visborg was rid of the plague. Schloss Grunwald, Count Orlok's home in Visborg, was burned to the ground, and the murmurings of what occurred would most likely only ever be remembered as a nightmare in years to come. There was a big question around why it was that Thomas managed to survive and escape the Nosferatu, and well, he pretty much managed to survive it because he fled Orlok's castle despite being trapped there when he fell into the river, and it was once he was inside of the church when the sisters found him where they nursed him back to health, where as von Franz mentioned, the praying that they did for him could have helped him get rid of the potential plague. The ending was pretty similar to the dream that Ellen had during the beginning of the movie where she said that she married death and there were only corpses in attendance. The ending of the movie saw her as the bride to who could be considered death, and the people of Visborg and Friedrich and his family were the corpses that would have been in attendance. My review of the movie. Robert Eggers has done it again with this movie, and he's made a piece of horror that feels so original in its style and approach. Do I think this is better than The Lighthouse or The Witch? Probably not, but it's not far off. It's definitely better than The Northman though. When the movie first started, I was a little concerned about the direction that it was going in. It felt like it was really slow at the start, and I didn't know if it would be able to have the pace, time, and rhythm to draw me into the world in the way that it needed to. There were a lot of shots that were just the camera turning around and Thomas being a small subject in the distance, and I got a bit tired of it. However, after the first third, around the time where Thomas fell out of the castle, the movie went in the right direction and it became a haunting, chilling, and tense environment where the pace increased and the story got more clarity. I just feel like the beginning didn't have much of a structure to it, other than Thomas going to Orlok's castle and us barely being able to understand Orlok because of the effects that were on his voice. But as time went on, it all started to make sense, and once we knew that Orlok wanted Ellen and that he was going to destroy Visborg and the people that she cared about most if she didn't commit herself to him, then it felt like the movie had a purpose. I feel like we knew that Orlok loved Ellen and wanted her to be his because she awoke him, but the scale of what was unfolding just wasn't really that clear from the beginning. And on reflection, in knowing how the second and third act go, I don't actually mind it being a bit of a slow burn. In terms of the casting of the movie, I thought Lily Rose Depp actually delivered the strongest performance that I've seen her in for a long while. The last thing I saw her in was The Idol, and that was just garbage, so seeing her in something where she was actually able to deliver lines that had emotion and passion, and her being able to express herself in a completely different way, it was nice to see. The role was actually originally supposed to go to Anya Taylor-Joy, and whilst this other double-barreled named actor would have done a great job, I think Lily Rose held her own for sure. I'd also say the same for Nicholas Hoult. He's as stable as they come in terms of having a male lead. The range that he had in this from the very beginning when he was getting ready for work, to him waking up from the nightmare that he had, to him then laying down by his dead wife's side. He went through it all, and you really felt that with his performance. Harry Styles was in talks for doing this role, but he ended up dropping out, and I'm kinda glad that he did, to be honest, because I really couldn't see him doing that role in the same way that Nicholas did. Ralph Ineson and Willem Dafoe were also great in this movie too. I thought Willem Dafoe's monologue at the end of the movie was really powerful, as his voice was the last thing that we heard. I also thought the scene where he was burning down Count Orlok's resting place was a strong moment too. The haunting laugh that he had in knowing that Orlok was going to be defeated because of his and Ellen's plan was mischievous but also filled with panic. An underrated character in this movie, and one that deserves praise, was the character Knock. Simon McBurney delivered a creepy, sinister, and obsessed individual that was willing to do anything to please his lord. The scene with the pigeon was pure horror at its core, and even the scene where he killed the guard on duty and then ran down the street like a maniac showed that he was genuinely one of the most frightening things in the movie. Then onto the big man himself, Bill Skarsgard as Count Orlok. It was genuinely so good. He looked filthy, haunting, and he was the creepiest vampire that I'd seen in a movie for a long while. The long drawn-out breaths that he had the first time we met him were a nice touch, and it actually sounded like he was in pain just being alive. That, also paired with the way that it seemed like he'd just transport places, showed that he could be with you no matter where you were. My only critique on the character would be that it was quite difficult to understand due to the depth of his voice and the effects on them. But if that's what Eggers was going for to add to the mystery, then fair enough, but for the early parts I did struggle. In terms of if this movie is worth a watch, I'd definitely say that it is. It's unique in its approach for a horror movie, and in today's day and age, you don't really see vampire movies without them being cringy or cheap. But this feels like the complete opposite. The world feels like a real place where you get trapped and you simply can't escape because the Nosferatu himself will even find you in your dreams. It's petrifyingly good, and I don't think you'd regret it if you went and saw it. So, there you have it. A review of Nosferatu and the ending explained. If you want to see more of your favourite TV series and movies being broken down, then click on the card in the top corner, or alternatively you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. And finally, if you'd like to see what I gave this movie out of 5 stars, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this movie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.